depending on the Christian. Yeah, just kind of kick the camera, but hi guys, welcome back to my channel. We are back here another Thursday to talk about mental health. Now I will be reading from my laptop because on my laptop I have the journal that I kept when I started therapy. As you guys can see, Journey to Self-Healing, and the subtext is a documentation of the shambles I'm in. So yeah, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that I'm a Christian, which I think is a well-known fact, but just to reiterate, I'm a Christian and I fully believe in mental health and wellness and therapy. I mean, God is all powerful and he can do all things, and what he does it well, but that doesn't mean that we don't have to put in work and that we should take our role in our own well-being for granted. That's like being, you know, like very unhealthy and saying, oh well, because I'm a Christian, you know, I don't need to exercise, I don't need to eat well because God got it covered. Reckless way to live. So as you guys can see, I also have on my self-care sweatshirt. It says self-care club, and then it says eat, hydrate, exercise, and sleep. 1 out of 4 is still something, so I don't think I'm doing too badly. Right, so yeah, a lot of people seem to think that if you're a Christian, you don't need therapy. However, as I mentioned in my previous video, therapy is useful for a multitude of things. So going to therapy is not only when, you know, you've had a mental or nervous breakdown and you're at your breaking point. Therapy can also be used to help you with stuff like time management and procrastination, things of that nature. So a lot of people are afraid to start therapy because they don't want to open that can of worms, especially people who have been through deeply traumatic experiences. They tend to put off going to therapy because they feel like they will be opening this can of worms and they won't be able to put the worms back into the can in order to function in daily life. And I know because I was one of those people. I knew for years that I needed help, but I was very reluctant about getting it. So one of the biggest fears in terms of me beginning my mental health journey was that I was really afraid that if I started digging into the deeper issues or the root of all of these symptoms I had been seeing showing up in my life, that I would fall apart, that I would be so emotionally unstable that I wouldn't be able to get myself together in order to function, whether at my job or in school, because during some of the years I was in school and I was considering therapy while I was in school. So yeah, I was kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to get myself back together in time. But the funny thing is, not going to therapy wasn't helping me either, because I was still battling with all these different issues on my own. So I did struggle with depression and anxiety for many years. I'm 25, so more than half my life, I want to say. Yeah, I struggled with depression and anxiety. depression to the point of like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. So I really felt like I needed to deal with that, because something very minuscule would happen sometimes, but because it's like a balancing act, like you're high functioning in depression or anxiety, so you're still getting stuff done, but then something very small would happen and my first thought would be, oh, life isn't worth living, I need to just, off myself. And it was really disturbing to me that that was always my first thought, or that was the solution to 3/4 of the problems, no matter how big or small. So I was like, yeah, I definitely need professional help. Depending on the Christian community that you belong to, you would hear, oh, you just need to like pray about it. And while you do need to pray about it, talk therapy is also extremely helpful. So if you're a Christian and you feel like you need therapy, don't hesitate. Therapy is amazing. It did wonders for me. I found it to be incredibly helpful, and I am in a much healthier place today because of the therapy I got last year. Now, one of the misconceptions about therapy is that once you start, you have to stay in therapy forever. It's just like physical therapy. So you go into it with your injury and you're working through it. You receive skills to help you cope with whatever the injury or the problem is. But over a period of time, once you get well enough to work on your own, then you no longer need to go to therapy. So after about a period of 3 or 4 months with BetterHelp, that's where I got therapy online, I felt as though I was in a really good place, and that I was able to function without my weekly therapy sessions. Now, I signed up for BetterHelp because my friend Danisha, shout out to Danisha, she's a social worker, and she sent me a promotion that BetterHelp was having, where they give a month free of therapy just to start you off. And I was like, yes, please. So I clicked the link and I signed up, and I started the month free of therapy. And I could have canceled at any time after the month was up, then I would have to pay for it, which is no problem to me, because at this point I was like, I really need help. I need to do something better than I'm doing. So even if I do end up having to pay, I don't mind. As I mentioned in my previous video, my first therapist, when I started telling her about some of my issues, she sort of was like, well, this seems like it's your fault, or what are you doing in this situation? And I have no problem taking accountability, but I wasn't really comfortable with her approach, because I found it to be more critical than it was helpful. And the great thing about BetterHelp is not only do they allow you to change therapists if you're not satisfied, but the first thing you do is you fill out a form that gives information about yourself, and then you basically say what you're looking for in a therapist. So for me, I preferred a female therapist because I felt as though a woman would be more able to relate to me and some of the issues that I was having, because, well, a lot of my issues also stemmed from the experiences that we have as women, where sometimes our life is more filled with fear than it needs to be because of our male counterparts constantly endangering us, you reject a guy and all of a sudden your life is in danger. So I felt like I needed to talk to someone about those fears. And it may sound silly to some people, but if you've never been in a situation where you have literally been afraid to reject somebody, it's not fun, and it's not something to laugh about. It's actually pretty horrifying and very serious. So I didn't want to be dismissed or even have the possibility of facing any measure of misogyny on that topic. So I looked for a female therapist. I also stated that I would prefer somebody of color, somebody who was Black preferably, because I mean, Blackness is also a big part of my identity. So I felt like I needed somebody who could relate to me in that regard. And also wanted a Christian because, well, as you know, my beliefs are a core part of my being. So I wanted somebody who could relate in that regard as well. And I mean, it may seem as though, you know, you're picking somebody who would just like agree with you, but a big part of therapy is being comfortable. So don't feel any guilt about picking somebody that you would be comfortable with, because it's about you. The experience is really and truly about you. So even when I wanted to change my therapist, at first I started guilt tripping myself, and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Like, this is the woman's bread. Like, this is how she makes her living. And then I was like, but if she's not helping me, then I need to do something better for myself. Like, I need to put myself first. So I went ahead and I changed therapists, and I got this fantastic therapist who really listened to me. And not only did she listen, but she also didn't like uphold my foolishness. Like where I was wrong in a situation, she would like, or not even like really wrong, just where I was blinded by certain factors, she would gently guide me to realization. So that was really, really great. Now, I had a lot of issues. So I am going to go into my journal, Journey to Self-Healing, a documentation of the shambles I'm in. I am a very particular person. So even when I was starting therapy, I had a good idea of the things that I wanted to talk about, the things I wanted to address. So I went ahead and I made my own online journal so that I could get through everything, because I didn't want it to be a case where I showed up to a session and I'm there and the therapist is there and they're like, and I'm just like I wanted to make sure that I was able to articulate exactly what it is that I need help with. So I did up a table of contents in my journal, and the first part was problem solving, and then I had boundaries, root causes. That's where I explored where I thought the root of my issues were. Trauma response. In the trauma response section, I tried to differentiate between what was my actual reaction or how I actually felt about a situation versus how I was responding because of trauma from past experiences. Then I have introspection. So every morning I would wake up and I would do introspection, like just think about where I am today, how I feel today, what are some issues I am currently experiencing, why I feel like I'm experiencing them. Just basically like sitting with myself and processing everything. And then the final section was, what would healthy look like? So for problem solving, it says, before you define a problem, it might feel vague or confusing. Writing out your problem will help to organize information, see it from new angles, and identify the most important issues. So the first question I asked myself was, when and where does my problem occur? So here you can put whether your problem occurs at home, whether it occurs at work, whether it occurs in your mind, because a lot of my problems occurred in my mind. Like sometimes it wouldn't even be something physical, it'll just be like a feeling I had, and my brain used to do this thing where nothing would even really be happening and I would have no evidence, but my brain would be like, that person hates you, that person is highly annoyed that you just did that. And then I would like go into this whole mental spiral when really I had no evidence. And that was one of the things that my therapist pointed out to me. She was like, how much evidence do you have of the things that you are telling yourself? Once I realized I had no evidence, I was like, all right, just get rid of those thoughts, good thoughts, good thoughts. Then I also looked at what are the causes of my problem. So this is where you think about all the possible causes, consider your own behavior as well as external factors. And I had 3 points which caused my problems. One of them being I struggle to create and stick to healthy boundaries. So I would say, I'm no longer going to give this person any access to me, but yet when the person messaged and they're like, oh, my life is in turmoil, I'll drop everything that I'm doing to go and help them. Then there is the other thing I had to ask myself was, how would I define my problem? So this is where you be as clear and comprehensive as possible. If there are many parts to your problem, describe each of them. So I talked about the fact that I experience severe anxiety. I end up people pleasing because I tried to avoid being emotionally damaged. But then I would end up in situations that I had no desire to be in. And being in those situations would then make me extremely depressed and anxious. And I had anxiety attacks so bad where I would struggle to breathe, get a high fever, and in extreme cases, I would just black out. Then under each problem, I would write solutions. I would come up with at least 3 solutions. So for that regard, for the anxiety, my solutions were practicing breathing exercises, making a conscious decision to do more things that I enjoy so I didn't constantly feel trapped in a place of doing things I hated, and practicing self-care and grounding techniques. So grounding techniques are basically where you remind your body that you aren't in the situation of trauma, that you are present, you are safe and secure. So if I was having an anxiety attack right now, grounding techniques would be like taking deep breaths, fixating on something in the room. And by fixating, I mean picking an object and describing facts about it to myself. So I would say the object is round, it has lavender, gold, these are the colors, the texture is smooth, a bit rough around the edges, and honestly by the time you finish describing a random object to yourself in great detail, your brain has already shifted from whatever traumatic experience you're envisioning to something solid and tangible. You can also ground yourself through physical sensation. Like if there is a carpet, I can burrow my toes into it, and the feeling of the carpet would, draw me back to being here. You can use scents. Smelling something would remind you of where you are presently. Basically, just engaging any or all of the 5 senses can help to ground you. Yeah, so I feel like this video is getting a bit long. Tell me if you guys have found it helpful so far. The next thing that I'll be addressing is boundaries. Boundaries was the next section in my journal, so I can also go through some more things that I wrote about in my therapy journal, as well as some things that my therapist told me, if you think that those things would be helpful. I personally don't have a problem being transparent and doing this, because I feel like a lot of people don't have access to therapy, and BetterHelp was really good, but it was also a bit pricey because I had to pay US, and US converted to my currency, which is the Eastern Caribbean dollar. I ended up paying, I was supposed to be paying over 800 EC, but after the financial aid discount that BetterHelp also offers, I ended up paying around, I want to say 600 EC for therapy, 6 to 7, somewhere there. So it's not like it's cheap, but you'll be in a way better, more stable place. One of the biggest tools that I used to combat my issues was CBT. This is cognitive behavioral therapy, and in short, obviously I'm not a licensed mental health professional, so what I say could be wrong, but my understanding of CBT is basically where you train your brain to think differently. So instead of having these automatic negative and anxious, and in many cases intrusive thoughts, you train your brain to think positively. One of the ways in which I did this was because in 2019 and there onward, I had a series of great soul-crushing disappointments. So I used CBT in that instead of thinking about what could have been living in the past, I would always make sure that I had something to look forward to. So I became a very forward-thinking person. So even if something didn't work out, then I would be like, okay, well, here's this other opportunity on the horizon. And if there wasn't another opportunity, I would create one or look for one. Another way in which I was able to help myself using CBT is if I felt like I had a multitude of disappointments, I would set small goals for myself every day. Little achievable things, like maybe eating breakfast at a certain time. So then when I did that, it gives my brain a shot of, I want to say, dopamine. So I feel as though I've accomplished something, and it gives me a positive boost throughout the day. So these are just little things that you could do to help your brain to move in a positive direction, and retraining your brain will ultimately help you overall. Where am I now regarding therapy? So I am in a wonderful place. Definitely not because everything is perfect. Everything is not perfect. I wish that it was. However, I have gotten a lot of tools to deal with some of the issues that I previously mentioned, and I've been doing the work. One of the greatest parts of therapy, and I mean greatest as in most fundamental, is that you have to be prepared to do the work. Your therapist is not going to do the work for you. You have to purpose in your heart that you are going to do all the worksheets that they send to you. And what my therapist used to tell me that I'm a great client, because I always came to every session prepared. I always came to every session with, okay, so this is what happened this week. This is how I felt about it. Here's what I wrote in my journal. Like, I was constantly like on top of things. You don't have to be like that, but just be prepared to be transparent, open, honest, and you should have a great experience. So once again, just let me know what you guys thought about this video in the comments. Let me know if you would like to hear the rest of my journal entries. I mean, some of the things I'm going to have to redact because I was naming names. I was naming names and talking about all the people who were stressing me out unnecessarily and taking me for granted and taking me for idiot. So I'd have to redact some of those names, but I definitely have no problem, just kind of going through what I struggled with in the event that if anybody else is struggling with it, that maybe this can help them, because at the end of the day, that's the goal, that you are helped. Yeah. So that's it from me. Stay beautiful, make wise decisions, don't let nobody take you for idiot. You are special, and I'll see you next time. Bye.